So wealth is not actual money in your bank account. Wealth is a state of being. Wealth is more than just money. It's more. It's everything. It's who you are. It's how you bring yourself to the world. How you present yourself to the world. So there's many currencies in the world. Love is one of the most important currencies. So wealth is who you are. And Emerson famously said, "I can't. Who you are speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you're saying." So that's wealth for me. How you help others.
Mm, I love that. And say more about this piece around it being your state of being, because this is really important, and this is something that
Yeah, so many great. Yeah, so many people, Celine, link their self worth to their net worth, and if something happens to them and they lose their money, then they get depressed because they've associated their net worth with their self worth with their net worth. So true wealth is to remove your self worth from your net worth, and that's a place to get to that. You can say, I'm resourceful. Wealth is like being resourceful. And so you can go out and bring wealth back into your life again because your actual true wealth is your resourcefulness, if that makes sense.
Welcome to It's Not What You Think, the podcast that takes you on a transformative journey to rewrite your story of greatness and reawaken your soul's purpose. I'm your host, Celine DaCosta, a subconscious mind expert, master coach, and believer in the limitless power and magic that lives within all of us. My intention in this podcast is to propel you into your next level of success so that you are free to create the life that your heart most desires. Through deep, actionable insights, personal stories, and world-class guests, I'll provide you with the tools, strategies, and resources you need to unlock the fullest expression of who you're meant to be in this lifetime so that you can consciously design a reality that is beyond what you could have ever dreamed of. Join me on this journey to personal growth and evolution, and let's live our lives in accordance with our highest soul's calling. This podcast is your weekly check-in to help this path become more simple, obtainable, and fun. Thank you for tuning in today, and now let's dive in.
Hello, and welcome back to a new episode of It's Not What You Think. Today, I have a dear friend of mine here with us, so dear actually that I was staying at his house literally a few weeks ago, and we had such a compelling, intriguing, important conversation around wealth, the stock market, and money that I realized, Owen O'Malley, you must come on my podcast and we need to talk about these things because people are not talking about these things and we need to hear it. So anyways, without further ado, Owen, welcome to the podcast. I'm glad to finally bring our conversation in a way that we can have flies on the wall.
Thank you very much. It's great to see you again, Celine.
Yeah, of course. So, Owen, before we dive into all things money, stock market, and wealth, would you be able to briefly introduce yourself, what you do, what your dharma is, your passion in this world, which is very connected to why you're here? And then I'll also share a little bit about how I know you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, my background used to be in science, and I used to grow salmon. And I came across the stock market through Tony Robbins when I did his wealth mastery, and it actually freed me. It gave me the freedom to be able to leave my day job and be self-reliant. And my passion now is to share that concept with other people. So many people come to this planet with a soul contract and some important work to do, but they don't get around to doing it because they get trapped in the matrix of a day job and all that goes with that.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of that, the way that I know Owen is I met him actually in the beginning of my own journey towards breaking out of exactly what he's speaking into. I had, it's about 3 years ago now, I had a health incident that led me to realize the importance of creating a life where I could take care of myself financially, I could take care of myself health-wise, and where I wanted to emancipate myself from this idea of needing to work for dollars. And so I was going through this, I guess you could say, this inner transformation of questioning how I was making money, of questioning the structure that I was operating under, and just asking the bigger questions of is there another way? Is there a more leveraged way to create wealth? And just around that time, I was in Bali. And I actually met Owen at one of the spas that we both used to frequent a lot. And we got to talking. I remember I specifically met him because he was wearing a Tony Robbins platinum hat. And I was introduced to him by a dear friend of ours who was at that point, Owen was helping him managing his investment portfolios. And he's like, you need to meet Owen. He's amazing. And then I saw the hat and I was like, oh my gosh, I was a Tony Robbins platinum. And we really bonded on being in the Tony Robbins community. And after a series of conversations, it became clear to me that Owen was extremely knowledgeable in the area of the stock market and wealth. And he actually had some of the answers to the questions that I was asking. So, talk about the universe intervening. It was magical. I was asking the questions and then Owen showed up and he started to answer some of the questions, some of which we will start to, pull apart today in the podcast. And so I started working with Owen a few years ago, and Owen has been supporting me with learning how to crack into the stock market, how to grow a sustainable portfolio over time, which we'll speak more into today, and essentially to like grow my own nest egg, which has been the most game changing nervous system calm things I could have possibly done for myself in the past few years as I continue to do business, grow my business, and be in that game. It's been really important to realize that there are multiple ways that we can generate income in our lives, and not all of those ways needs to be working for the dollar. And so yeah, that's something that feels really important to dive into. So I have a series of questions for you today, Owen, but before I do, would you be able to, somebody who's listening and they're not like, maybe they've thought about the word wealth, maybe they have contemplated it, maybe some people are like, oh, I have my own definition of wealth, just so we can all be on the same page, would you be able to share with us how you define the word wealth?
Yeah, and it really hit home to me years ago. I saw an interview with Warren Buffett, who's the most successful investor on the planet.
And your mentor.
Yes, yeah, we go to his AGM most years. We've been there at least 10 times in the last 20 years, so we follow him. And he was once asked that very question about what is wealth at a university, and he said, "Wealth is if you took all my money away from me today, do I have the capability of getting it back? Have I have the magnetism to attract it back into my life?" And he said, "Yes, I do." So wealth is not actual money in your bank account. Wealth is a state of being. Wealth is more than just money. It's more. It's everything. It's who you are. It's how you bring yourself to the world. How you present yourself to the world. So there's many currencies in the world. Love is one of the most important currencies. So wealth is who you are. And Emerson famously said, "I can't. Who you are speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you're saying." So that's wealth for me. How you help others.
Mm, I love that. And say more about this piece around it being your state of being, because this is really important, and this is something that
Yeah, so many great. Yeah, so many people, Celine, link their self worth to their net worth, and if something happens to them and they lose their money, then they get depressed because they've associated their net worth with their self worth with their net worth. So true wealth is to remove your self worth from your net worth, and that's a place to get to that. You can say, "I'm resourceful." Wealth is like being resourceful, and so you can go out and bring wealth back into your life again because your actual true wealth is your resourcefulness. If that makes sense.
Mm. So I'm sure you have worked with many, many people who have tied their self-worth to their net worth. I know I've definitely gone through that chapter. And I also think it goes in layers as well. There's like different nuances, different layers to it as you go along, as you rise in levels of financial success. I'd be curious, you having mentored and been behind the scenes of huge portfolios, we're talking like millions, multi-millions, and also like people who are more in the starting phase. What happens that causes somebody to tie their net worth to their self-worth? And what have you seen is the process of untangling that knot? How do you untangle
Yeah,
it?
yeah. So I mean, we're born beautiful babies with no hang up around money whatsoever, and some of the beautiful work we do is we go into schools and we mentor children in the whole concept of creating wealth within the stock market. And they do phenomenally well because they've got none of that baggage, that emotional baggage around money. So a lot of it is associated with emotions, Celine. It can be down to their home life and the way the parents influence them, or religion, or even the teachers in their school. So a lot of it can be deep rooted, Celine. And one of the things we've been able to do is we've been able to put people in communities and get them to work together is like a cooperative, where they dip the toe in the water with us on a small amount of money, meet with us once a month, and they build up confidence in themselves and belief in themselves, and they begin to understand that it is not rocket science to do very well in the stock market. They just have to copy a proven system that has been passed down from generations, from like Warren Buffett to Tony Robbins to me, and now to my people. And so once they get over that self doubt, self belief, limiting beliefs, if you call it, that, wow, this can be done and I can do it, then they see it more or less as a system, that it's almost like a river that runs past them, that they can dip their bucket into the river and take the water at any time. And so it is a journey people have to go on, Celine. It doesn't happen overnight. But the great thing is that if they join a community like we create, that is definitely the starting point to get there.
And before we start, speaking into the stock market, can you share, similar to what you did with wealth, what is the definition, as when we speak into the stock market in this episode, how would you define it?
Well, wealth is the income from your assets matches your lifestyle. So what I mean by that is you start small in the stock market, you build up, you start to own shares. And if you actually think of the word share means sharing the wealth of a company with you. The way the stock market works, if Celine and I were in a privately owned company, let's say we made glasses, drinking glasses, and we got a massive order from China for 1 billion drinking glasses, and we don't have the resources within our company to go and even buy the raw material to make the glasses to deliver the order. We have to either raise money from our friends and family or go to the stock market and say to the stock market, help, we've got this big order, we need some extra cash. And the market allows us to float our company, and then we start to share the wealth. So before that, we just share the wealth with myself and Celine within our own private company. Now we share the wealth with the general public. And that's a very important concept to understand, is that the vision we have for the stock market is that if everybody could be owners of shares in the stock market, we would truly share the wealth on this planet. What I mean by this simply, if Celine owns shares in Starbucks and I go and buy a cup of coffee and the company makes a profit, she makes a little bit of that profit. And then if I own shares in Tesla and Celine buys a Tesla car, I benefit from that because I'm a shareholder of Tesla. So that's the most important thing that people have to get over the hang up. A lot of people have negative associations with the stock market, especially people that are in the spiritual world, because for some strange reason, there's a funny saying that namaste means no money, because they wrongly associate the stock market as being bad and being evil and not serving society. It actually is. And Celine talked about earlier, before we went on air, is that you can vote with your money. The vision we have for the stock market is that if everybody owns shares in the stock market, and if a company is not ethical and doesn't do the right thing, you can actually cause them not to do well in the market by voting with your dollars. And so it's definitely part of the people, but not enough of people participate in the stock market yet. But over time they will, when they understand the power of actually sharing the wealth of the planet with everybody on the planet.
So I want to slow down on this concept, because there might be people listening to this thinking, wait, what? I was not into the stock market, or I did think, and I know I remember specifically going to one of your conferences about a year ago and raising my hand and being like, I just don't, I don't know about the ethical part of this. I don't feel great about this. So I was definitely one of those people that had suspicions about the stock market. But what I really loved about a conversation that we had a few weeks ago that inspired me to have you come on is you talking about wealth, sharing the wealth. And you've just given like a brief summary of this, but if we were to even zoom into this, I would like to go even deeper of how is participating in the stock market sharing the wealth in an ethical way?
Yeah, so let's talk about the example of something like Tesla. Tesla is an ethical company. They want to go easier on the planet. They want to produce electric cars. The vision for Tesla eventually is that everybody that owns a car on the planet, they're wasting a lot of resources, because if you are true, you only use your car about 10% of the time. 90% of your car sits at home doing nothing. And so Elon Musk's vision is that he's going to create all these self-driving cars that will you'll just call a car when you want it through some app on your phone, and therefore we're going to actually need less cars on the planet because the cars will work 100% of the time, and so we need 1/10 of the cars on the planet because they'll be working 10 times harder. So that's something that's noble. It makes perfect sense once technology can make that all happen, and it's ethical because self-driving cars, when they're done right, the cars won't crash into each other, so people won't get injured and suffer from driving. So we that is something that Elon is putting out there. If everybody participates in it, it's better for the planet. And you and I and anybody listening to this podcast can actually go out and buy shares in Tesla and participate in the future wealth because it's going to be incredibly successful. It makes perfect sense to do. Does that make sense? It's that simple. Once you buy a share in Tesla, if you actually think about it, that the job of Tesla's employees is to increase your net worth. That's it's enshrined within the shareholder agreement of all companies, is that the number one responsibility of the executives of a company is to increase the shareholder value. And so when you actually think about it, when you buy shares in Tesla, Elon Musk actually works for you. He owns 21% of Tesla right now, but as CEO of that company, his number one responsibility is to increase your worth if you buy shares in the company. So you actually can be in a situation where the richest man on the planet actually works for you and has to get out of bed every day and work for you.
Interesting. So, something that perked my ears just now is when we're saying that the employees of the company, their number one job is to increase shareholder value, which is great for the shareholders. But there was another quote that I heard somewhere, I don't remember where, that it was, what if the employees of a company aren't there to work for the company, but the company's there to grow the employees? And what that creates, and I don't know if it's just the way that my mind's setting it up, is almost like, oh, but if the employees of a company are there to increase shareholder value, then how do we take care of the employees? Because when we're looking at wealth distribution, it's not just about the CEO that's getting wealthier, and also the shareholders, aka anyone who's investing, you, me, or whoever's investing into the market. But then what about the people who are in charge of creating, like increasing shareholder profit? How do we ethically, like, how does it remain ethical with them? Do you know what I'm asking?
Yeah, I know 100%, and you've hit a very important point. So all great US companies and publicly traded companies have share option schemes for their employees. And there's a very famous story of Sam Walton, who started Walmart, whatever, 40, 50, 60 years ago. From day one, from his very first employee, Sam Walton insisted that 6% of their wages was actually shares in the company. And you can study this now, Celine. There are people retiring from Walmart today who have been working in Walmart for their, their working career, 10, 20, 30 years, just stacking shelves. They're walking out of Walmart worth $1, $2, $3 million, basically because they own shares in the company. And actually, if you study it, Walmart is 51% owned by the employees of the company because they've just accumulated shares over time. So that's the way we take care of the employees as well. Make sure they have shareholding in the company as well.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing, I'm going to regurgitate it in a way that feels like it makes sense, and then let me know if I'm off in anything. So what I'm hearing is that when companies are being created and they are going, they're growing and they're growing, when they open themselves up to the stock market, it's basically like hey, there's a lot of demand for this product, for this offer, this service, and we need help. We need finances. We need money. Basically, they need more than what they can do on their own. And so when they open themselves up for the public to be able to invest in them, and when the public invests in them, what they do is they own a tiny, whatever that share is, that they own a tiny part of the company. So it is in the company's best interest to continue to grow and to continue to make profit. And then that profit essentially is getting redistributed across the board to all of the shareholders. Yeah.
100%. And just while you were talking there, I pulled up a report for Walmart, and I'm looking at the figures as of this week. The people that work for Walmart own 45.6% of the company. The company's worth $560 billion. So They are worth 250 billion.
Wow. Okay. So, but with Walmart, this is a company, and even with Tesla, these are unicorn companies that are doing
Mhm.
good. My curiosity, though, is how many of companies are actually behaving that way? You know what I mean? Like, how many companies are out there that are treating their employees like Walmart is, that are actually having a clean, clear vision of helping in the future and collaborating? Because at least from my perception, not every company is operating like that. And so, what happens with the companies that are not redistributing their wealth with employees, that are not actually creating a vision of the future? Like, I don't want to name anyone, but there's companies that are putting toxins in our foods and doing really, really fucked up things, like, pardon my French. So, what about that?
Yeah, and so the beauty about the stock market is only the good guys survive. And so that's the beauty about the vision we talked about earlier, that when everybody owns shares in publicly traded companies, they will be able to vote with their dollars. And so those companies that are not ethical and not, as you said, putting poison in the foods, they will get voted out of existence because people refuse to invest in those and will invest in the companies that are ethical. And so the cream will rise to the top. It's like pulling a pint of Guinness in
Hmm.
Ireland. The cream will rise to the
Hmm.
top. It's going to be the exact same
Hmm.
way. Only the good guys will survive. And Tesla looks after its employees. A lot of the companies that look after the employees, that's part of the secret of success.
What about companies like Coca-Cola or Monsanto, or ones that are Nestle, the ones that are not, that have been notorious for not ethical activities?
Yes, yeah, in the food side of it. So companies like Coca-Cola know this, and they're actually diversifying a lot. If you actually study it, if you look at the Coca-Cola portfolio now, a lot of it is bottled water. A lot of it is they recognize that eventually people are going to again vote with their dollars and not support sugary drinks, and so they're preparing for that by diversifying into healthier drinks.
So some of these companies you're saying are preparing in the ways that they are presenting.
Yes.
Mhm, mhm. Cool. So then my next question is, for people who are listening to this and they're like, "Yeah, I don't buy it. I don't wanna do Coca-Cola. I'm not interested in Monsanto." Like, "No, thank you. No Nestle for me." And, I'm gonna I'm one of those people. So I still have my skepticisms, but, um, I feel that, at least the way that I found it, I've navigated through this. Um, there are still ways to navigate the stock market and maintain, even if there's a company that you're not trusting yet or not loving yet. There's a way to select, like, the good guys as they relate to your specific values. And I know this is a conversation you and I have had multiple times, which is that even though there's some companies that are doing quite well, and there's been moments where I said, I get that, but I don't want to, I am not putting my money in that company. It's just a personal choice. Would you be able to advise as to, if someone is looking to enter the stock market, but they really, really care about companies that align with their values, and they really care about it being, voting with their dollars, um, how to find, like, the good guys?
Yeah, and then the beauty about it is there are thousands to choose from, Celine, so you can be very selective. I mean, most people's portfolio of shares, even if it's a large multi-million dollar account, they're down to 50 companies or less. So it is easy to find the 50 good guys out there. And a great place to go to is valueline.com. Valueline have been around since 1931. They're an ethical company in of itself because they were founded from the pain of the Wall Street crash in 1929, where a lot of unscrupulous brokers did what's called pump and dump. They pumped up companies and they dumped it on unsuspected investors. And so Valueline run a very ethical service and have been doing for over 90 years now, where they only focus on the best 1,700 companies. So that would be the first place to start. If it's not on the value line universe, the 1,700. Remember, you only need 30 or 40 or 50,
Mhm.
a very successful portfolio. You can go in there and pull down an independent report. So you're not actually getting the company propaganda, the company BS. You're getting an independent report written by Value Line analysts who've been doing it since 1931.
And when you say the best 1,700 companies, what qualifies a company as being the best?
Being the most successful. And long term, you can't be successful if you don't look after your employees, if you don't look after the environment, if you don't take care of the shareholders as well. You just don't
Mm.
survive
Why not?
because people vote with their dollars. And there's been instances of in the past like this. You might have heard of things like GameStop, where young millennials have ganged up on unscrupulous hedge funds, and actually, some hedge funds are shorting companies to try and damage them, and millennials are getting together and they're actually going against the hedge funds and putting the hedge funds out of business. And so we are in a situation now because of the everything is now public and it's on the stock market and everyone's access to the information. We are in a situation where we can vote the bad guys out and keep the good guys.
Interesting. I heard about this story vaguely, but I'm curious about how can we vote the bad guys out and keep the good guys? Like, what can that look like, practically speaking?
So the way it can look like is that it's almost like guerrilla warfare. Is that people just to get together on forums and bulletin boards on the internet and say this company is not doing the right thing here. They can either short the stock and drive the share price down, or they can decide to dump the stock. And by selling the stock, it actually drives the share price down. And then they can drive it down so much that the company becomes illiquid and goes out of business. So
Wow.
a company is really putting their future in the hands of the public when they go public.
Hmm. What I really love about what you're saying is that it seems that the public does have a say. Because sometimes it appears, I mean, I know I've felt this, like, almost helpless feeling of these companies can just get away with doing whatever they want to be doing. But what I'm hearing and what I've experienced through, the work that we've done in the stock market is that there is a way to sift through the thousands and thousands of companies, using Value Line. There's has been a way to sift through all of these companies to really see, like, what are the 1,700 companies that are best performing over the years, over time, with the best value, return on investment. And that's something that I learned from you is like, okay, there are companies, they might not be like the top sexy companies that everybody's talking about, but there is a really good chunk of companies that are, stable, that have been stable over time, that has been performing over time. Maybe not the biggest brand names, but companies that have been around for quite a while and do have a much better return on investment than actually arguably some of the biggest, like, hot, sexy brand names out there. And the other thing that I love about that, and I've experienced this in my own portfolio. I forgot how many companies I have right now. Is it 20, 30? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think you've run about 40 companies now.
Yeah, so I'm about 40, but what's really cool about this is that there's been several instances where we were selecting from this pool of already pre-selected high quality companies. And that is where we can really marry soul and logic, because logically those companies make sense. But there has been moments where we were selecting certain companies to invest in, and I was able to use my intuition and say, I don't, I'm not feeling this one. I'm feeling this one, but one of the things that I think, especially in the spiritual community, can be, and when it comes to money and finances, can be a little dangerous. Is when the intuitives, the empaths out there, the healers, the psychics, all that jazz, they go out there and just, like, guess. Oh, I really feel like this company. I really feel this, and that is a dangerous game to play. But one of the ways that I've been able to have the best of both worlds is that I can still use my intuition. I can still use, like, whatever that feeling, that whatever my heart is calling me towards, but I am already choosing whatever that feeling is. It's coming from a pre-selected pool of companies that I know for sure are going to be in support to me, and that are a smart idea. It's like, going to the car lot and you're intuitively selecting what's the Ferrari that you want to be driving, like which one feels better. But that on a baseline, there's going to be certain standards, certain qualities of whatever is in this parking lot that are not going to slip by. You're not going to get something that is like second class, quality. So that's what I really love about that selection process. And speaking of spiritual, there's a conversation I remember having with you where you were sharing with me about the spiritual aspect of the stock market and the ways that you actually relate to the stock market spiritually. And I was wondering if you could share a bit more about that, as I found that viewpoint to be very interesting.
Well, it's similar to some of the things we talked about earlier, Celine, is that the word share means you share wealth. And so that's good. It's also the concept that we talked about that if you own shares in a publicly traded company and I buy that product, you benefit. And then consequently, if I own shares in a publicly traded company and you buy shares in that product, I benefit. So we benefit each other. So the spiritual aspect of it is that we can share in the wealth of the planet. And that's the way the planet is going to go. I read a book called The 10th Insight. It's the book after the Celestine Prophecy. James Redfield, I think, is the author. And he talked about that concept. His vision of the world is his vision is that all 8 billion souls on the planet could today, if they wanted to, buy shares in publicly traded companies and truly share. Everybody in the world could share in the wealth of all of the companies in the world. So it would become just one big family where we're all benefiting from each other. We're looking after the shareholders, we're looking after the employees, we're producing good ethical products, we're not harming the planet, and it all can work. It will just take time for people to grasp those concepts.
Mm-hmm. Hello, hello, soul family. I hope you're enjoying this episode so far. Before we dive back into the content, I love the opportunity to share a free wealth expansion resource that I've created for you. This is for those of you listening wanting to massively expand your abundance and wealth codes. I'm popping in here to invite you to come watch my free wealth building masterclass called Invested. Invested peels back the curtains on one of my favorite long-term wealth building strategies, which is investing in the stock market. I run this masterclass with my financial educators and experts, Owen O'Malley and Anna Rodriguez, who have a collective 40 plus years of experience in the stock market and manage over $100 million of portfolios. They'll break down the stock market and how you can make the best use of it, even if you're brand new, in really simple and easy to understand language, so that you can learn how to create exponential wealth without spending the next years laboring over making a course or some other passive income tactic that isn't even truly passive. You're going to want to listen to this one, especially if the stock market has felt intimidating to you. It will open your mind and heart to how to allow money to work for you so you don't have to spend the rest of your life working for it. And if you are familiar with the stock market, I have a feeling you're about to learn something new. If listening to this excites you, to receive access, you can go into the show notes or type in the link celineacosta.com/invested. Now let's get back into the episode. So the concepts are really beautiful, this idea of a company, an organization coming together and opening itself up to the public so that everyone in the public could share. And as the company performs and as the company is out of more service, then that means that more people get wealthier and wealthier because his wealth just starts getting redistributed. And I think that sounds so incredible in theory, but I'm still having a hard time buying what is the way forward in practice. And, I know this is something you thought a lot about, and this is something you're much more well versed in. So I want to keep poking here because as a skeptic, as you know, I always like to challenge, plays the devil's advocate, ask the tough questions.
Sure.
I want to see what the pathway forward actually is for this practically in today's world.
Yes. So the universe is abundant, truly abundant. You don't have to tell the grass to grow; it just grows. And touching about wealth is that the table of life will pay you in direct proportion to the value you bring to that table. There's a universal principle. If you add value, you become valuable. And so Elon Musk is currently the richest man in the world. Why? Because he's taken on board, uh, two or three very valuable concepts. One, electric cars, but two, even to help the human race survive. If ever the planet got hit with a meteorite, and it has happened in the past, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, civilization has been wiped off the face of this planet 3 times in the past. And so Elon's vision is that we need to move a certain amount of people off this planet into another planet, namely Mars for the moment. So in the event of an asteroid hitting this planet, the species will survive. And so you have to ask yourself, like, Elon Musk was born as a brand new baby, like with nothing, and now he's the richest man in the world. How has that happened? Because he's figured out a way to add more value than any other person on the planet. And he's been well rewarded for that. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're maybe frustrated with the level of your income, level of your wealth, the actual responsibility is upon you. You have to invest in yourself, invest in some of Celine's programs to just become better at what you do. And when you add more value, you become more valuable.
Mm. I love this concept, as this is something that I remember learning from Tony as well, that the more value that you add to society, the more you essentially are going to get paid for it.
Yes.
And this is such an empowering reframe that really goes from the space of I need to create this money, or I need to make this money, to how can I add more value. And what this also reminds me of is the conversations that we have had around the shift of going from, and this is a conversation I've had in several other episodes actually, of going from me to we, and this like almost psychological and emotional shifts that happens in the human being, where we start to realize that life is more than just about us, and it's actually more about contribution as well. Some people realize that earlier on. Some people actually don't, at least in my observation, don't realize that until they start making enough money in their life to realize that more money isn't actually going to fill the gap. It's not about like, it hits a point where I've seen so many people go through this, where they just hit a ceiling of, if I make more, I'm not happier. It's just kind of like the same thing but bigger. And I see you smiling because I know you have had these conversations with many of these people. So would you be able to like help us see behind, for someone who's listening that's like, wait, what do you mean? I just want to make more money. Can you help us see, like, unpack what is this shift that happens internally? Because I know you've had it inside of you. So can you walk us through what that shift looks like, and where you find people most go through this? Like, at what stage in their life have you witnessed and observed people going through this shift? Like, what does it take,
Yeah, so just as you were speaking there, I remember a story, and people can Google this. One of the richest men in Germany around about 2008, with the collapse of the financial system in 2008. Before 2008, he was worth 5 billion euros.
Billion.
Billion, B with a B. After it, with the downturn of everything, he was only worth 2 billion. So in his mind, he lost 3 billion. He was still worth 2 billion. What did the guy do? He committed suicide. So going back to our early conversation, he linked his self-worth to his net worth. And the shame of losing 3 billion, he couldn't focus on the 2 billion he still had. And so when does the shift happen? I've seen it a lot of the times, and the reason I smile is when people sell their companies, Celine. They work their whole life, they work their ass off, they have a sale, a nice successful exit, and they get a check for 10 million or 20 million. Or I met one guy, one of my clients, 80 million. And then they go into deep depression because they lose a sense of identity, because their identity was linked to I'm the CEO of this company and now I've got nothing. They lose their sense of purpose because the purpose was to build the company. Now they've got no purpose. And so they go through a real shift of, oh shit, is this all there is in life? And the only way they find fulfillment is to go out and do good work, to maybe get involved in charities, to donate their time. And then they recognize the true fulfillment is in the service of others.
It's a shame that most people recognize it after they've sold their multi-million-dollar company, though.
Yes.
Is there a way to like accelerate this? Because I feel like, when we talk about the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, I find that even what you're saying, that this like concept of the importance of contribution and giving back, which is such a life hack. It's such a secret to life. And so many people only get that once they've like reached certain levels of wealth and abundance, material abundance in their life, to realize that the material abundance is not going to provide them with that inner fulfillment. And, I have also had so many clients that I've been able to support through this process, similar to, what you're sharing. But it does leave me wondering, what about all the people that don't become CEOs of a company, don't get to that point? Like, how can they experience this? How can this click without necessarily needing to sell a very successful venture?
Yeah, so they probably have to do the work. I mean, they have to go down through the spiritual rabbit hole. They have to do a lot of introspection and want to improve. Like, Tony Robbins is a beautiful human being because he takes millions of people to that first stage of life, the personal development stage. But that's just stage one. After that, you've got beautiful people like Deepak Chopra, Joe Dispenza, who take people into the spiritual realm and into the whole etheric side of life. And so there's no shortcut. People have to just have to do the work and have to realize is that true fulfillment, as I said earlier, comes in the service of others. And I experienced it myself because my whole goal was to use the stock market to be free from my day job. Once I became free from my day job and I had achieved my goal, and I kind of said, well, what's next? And then very quickly I said, well, it's obvious. Now I need to go out and show other people how to do it. And I actually get more joy from other people doing that than I do. And I've witnessed people become worth, many millions. And now they're doing beautiful work. I was one guy in particular, he's helped hundreds of people down the south of Ireland. I just recently attended one of his events down in the Cork Opera House, where he put it, 1,000 people showed up at his event. Half of the room he had helped significantly. And he couldn't have done that, Celine, if he didn't join our investment club, 10 years ago and work his way to become in a position that now his sole purpose is to help people with addictions, people with drug addiction, alcohol addiction, and help them put their life back together again. And so he is so happy now because he's fulfilled with that. He's filled up with that, if you like, soul contract that he discovered, that it's not about the money now, it's about the value he adds to people.
So what I love about what you're sharing is that when it gets to the point where it's not about the money anymore, we get to really see who we are, who we truly are.
Yes.
And for some people, it can be catastrophic, like what you're saying about those who sell their company for millions and realize, wow, I did all of this work, but I didn't develop a strong sense of identity. I connected my sense of self-worth to my net worth. I put so much of who I am into something that is external of me instead of cultivating my internal landscape. So that is the catastrophic side of getting to the point where you realize that you have all the money you could ever have. Money is not a problem, but now you're faced with a mirror and realizing that the piece of you that you needed to reclaim all along, you haven't done. And now it's time to do that. And so for some people, it can be really ungraceful. But what I'm also hearing is that for people who do the work of really diving into their self-worth, like cultivating their sense of self-worth, cultivating their value, cultivating self-love, and all those things that allow us to become centered and embodied in and really strong in our own sense of identity, independent of external factors. They will reach a point where also same thing, same dilemma, money is no longer an issue. There's enough of it. But the natural, next step of a human being arriving to that place of I'm good and my self-worth is, sovereign from my net worth is actually what comes really naturally to the human spirit, which is I want to grow and I want to contribute. And what I'm hearing is that next step of sorting out, your money story and creating these channels and avenues of wealth that work for you is being able to breathe, exhale, so to say. And in that exhale, there's just a natural desire to give, and there's a natural desire of the human to contribute and to be of service. So the real question is, how can we create that for ourselves? How can we create a situation where we can free ourselves from this concept of money?
Yeah, Tony Robbins talked about this, and very early on in his career, he tells a story about that one Thanksgiving they had no money and no food in the house, and a stranger came to the house and gave them food, and he in that instant realized, wow, um, I'm going to do that next Christmas for somebody or next Thanksgiving, and he did it, and he just helped one family, and then he helped two, and then he helped four, and then he helps millions now. So it's you can experiment with it with really simple ways. I mean, I don't know, there are many toll booths now where you actually have to throw money into the basket, but it's the simple thing of when you come to the toll, pay for the person behind you. And you just feel good about it. You hit the nail on the head there, Celine. It's ingrained within us as a species, as a spiritual being, to want to help and serve others. It's part of who we are. And so you can experience that in very simple ways. Just, if you're ever in a checkout and you notice maybe the person in front of you is struggling financially and they have to put some of the products back because they can't pay for them, offer to pay, little things like that. And you
Mm.
look at the feeling you get when you do little things like that, then you just become, there's a positive association with actually helping people. And then you can magnify that and do like Tony, go from feeding one family to two families to now millions of families. So everybody listening to this podcast can do a simple thing, and just sit back and enjoy the feeling.
I love what you're saying because at the core of what you're saying is you don't have to wait until you're the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company that's about to exit for you to reclaim your power when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to generosity and embodying that, and also when it comes to cultivating your sense of wealth independent of what's in your bank account. I remember when you were speaking, I remember this one time where I was in one of those paid bathroom lines, and I didn't have €1. I mean, it's not because I'm don't have the money, but I just didn't have it on me. And I remember feeling so embarrassed and like, oh my God, I have to go back to the car or whatever. And the guy's she's just like pops in €1. I was like, go ahead. And it was €1. But the way that I felt was like, oh my God, I was so freaking grateful. And even I remember another time where I was pulling into the parking lot, I was following my friend. And then when I pull into the parking lot to pay, the woman's like, "Oh, that's already been paid for you." And these moments where I am just a recipient of this completely unexpected, has no reason gratitude. I don't ever think about if what was €1, €10, 20, like it never crosses my mind how much money it was. Like all I can feel is just how grateful I am that somebody did that. It's the surprise, it's the glee, it's the like little like like joy that someone treated you to a coffee or treated you to something even small. And what I love about that is that, maybe for those people who are listening and they're like, okay, that's great, but I can't buy my parents a vacation right now to another country, or I can't do these things, these grandiose things, or even like I don't feel like I'm resourced to be investing in the stock market, which we're going to break down that belief system in just a moment. But still, like it's like, what are the small things that you can do every day that put you in that state of being of service, that allow you to create value? So even outside of your day job, there are so many little ways that you can create value for the people around you, that you can create value just by breathing, just by existing, and asking the question, how can I be of service today? What's a small thing I can do? Because what I'm hearing is that this is what expands your muscle to be more in that state. Because what I'm also hearing, with that conversation of the guy who killed himself because he lost 3 billion and still had 2 billion, his focus was on lack. His focus was on scarcity. His focus was on what he lost and what he didn't have instead of all the things that we had. And I find this in my daily practice as well, is so many times, like every single morning and every single night and every chance that I can, I've made it an active practice to express gratitude for everything I have, no matter what's going on in the business, no matter if the stock market is up or down, if Bitcoin's up or down, it doesn't matter, because still every single day I'm in such a deep privileged place to be alive. And that's what we need to focus on. So I really love the way that you've made it so simple, achievable, and practical for someone who's listening to practice their wealth identity and to expand. And I'm also curious, you spoke about multiple times, you've said you've got to do the work, you've got to do the inner work. As you define it, what does the quote unquote work to grow your wealth identity and expand into wealth, like what does that look like?
Yeah. So just before we go there, I just want to share with you that the way you felt so good about someone paying for you, that simple €1, if you felt good, I can guarantee the person that did it for you felt 10 times better. So that's the message out there, is that if you've got something you do, and if you chase the money, what you do will suffer. But if you focus on the value you're adding, the money will follow. So it's like some people put the cart before the horse instead of the horse before the cart. But
Mm.
to do simple things like there are basic things in terms of wealth creation, or there's simple things you can do in terms of just a budgeting thing. I mean, there's a great book, if someone could get, if they're listening to this, it's called The Richest Man in Babylon. It's a real easy read. It's a real thin, you'd read it in an hour or less. And he talks about the concept of pay yourself first. So no matter how little your income is or how big it is, for every $100 you take in, just divide it out, but make sure that you get paid first. So the book talks about 70% should go towards your bills and whatever commitments you have, 30% should go to you. In the order of 10% goes to charity, something that's close to your heart, so you have positive associations with adding value. 10% goes to investing, and 10% goes to a rainy day fund. So the rest, the other 70%, just pays your bills. And so that's what I would say to people: is just get into that discipline of, it doesn't matter if I make 100 or 1,000 or 100,000 a month or whatever you make per month. Discipline yourself to take a certain proportion to investing, certain portion to tithing, certain portion to an emergency fund, and the other 70% pay the bills. So, but pay yourself first.
And what is when you say pay yourself first, what does that do for someone? Because I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs listening who are not doing that. So let's call that
Yeah,
out.
yeah, and so many people put all of their resources into their business, and they, you and I know the statistics of small business, small to medium sized businesses. Like 90% of businesses fail after 10 years. 90% of business never get to a turnover of a million. 90% of even those 10% that survive beyond 10 years and get to that million, that 10%, their profit margin is as small as about 5%. So they're actually only clearing about 50 grand a year, and they work 80, 90, 100 hours to do that. And so they make the mistake, Celine, is they pour everything into that business. And then when the business fails, they lose everything. And so from the very get go, again, in your business, either personally or in your business, do the same thing. Take a certain amount every month and just put it away into investing, so that you have something to fall back on. And
Mm.
something as small as, people, if you get out a piece of paper and write this down, $200 a month invested at 2% per month growth over a 20-year period gets you to 1 million. 200 at 2% a month at 20 years is worth a million. That's the power of just putting a small amount away every month.
Mhm, mhm. And, this is something that, by the way, for those of you who are listening, I'm going to be linking to a masterclass that Owen had and I have run together called Invested, which I highly, highly recommend that you watch. It's completely free. And we will go deeper into, for those of you who are like, this math doesn't add up, or like, how do I do that? I need to, I'm visual. I need to see numbers. I want to see how it works. We're not diving into that in this episode, but we will be diving into it in that masterclass to really show you the breakdown of how compounded interest works over time, and how you can, be investing as little as like 200 a month, and creating a nice nest egg for yourself in the future. One of the things that I know made a huge difference in my life is when I started, the investment portfolio with you, and I have a few other investments, but specifically with you in the stock market. It was the first time where I saw that there was another way for me to live that wasn't, quote unquote, depending on my business revenue. And it's really interesting because I actually started my investment portfolio around time of COVID. And even though my business was thriving at the time, I remember thinking, wow, if something like this happens again, or anything happens, or, if when I become a mom one day and my business needs to take a step back, I don't want to be put in a position where my only source of income and my only source of financial security depends on my business, especially, even though I believe I'll be around for a long time. You also got to pay attention to the statistics, like what Owen just shared about 90% of businesses not making it beyond 10 years. So given all of those data points, it felt really important for me to create multiple streams of income so that I can be taken care of. And I can't tell you like what it did for me from a nervous system perspective, even at the time where I would be like, there's an income dip. Oh, and then it went up and then it went down. And, like riding the roller coaster that can be being an entrepreneur in those first formative years, and realizing that despite what was going on in my business, I knew that there was a steadily growing source of income that was, compounding in the back end. And I think that's such an important thing to be paying attention to, because so many people, as Owen has shared, they will put all their eggs in the basket of their business and invest and not even pay themselves, which is, I mean, I was in that first few years of my business. It took me, I had to read that book, Profit First, to realize, oh, wait, this is not a good idea. This is not good for my nervous system. And coming into this realization that, night or day, rain or shine, I'm going to get paid. And part of that is going to go towards my future, towards my investment portfolio. So that feels like something that's really, really important. So for people who are unfamiliar then with the stock market, or they're new to it, or maybe haven't been using it in a way, they've been burned by it, what would you recommend? Like, how would you recommend that they start to create that nest egg for themselves and start to really relate to the stock market in a healthy way?
Yeah, so you can join one of our communities, and they meet with us once a month on Zoom. They put in as little or as much as they want. They can start small, as Celine said, with even as little as 100 a month to dip the toe in the water and observe how the system works. We don't have time to go down the rabbit hole of the system on this particular podcast, but one of the concepts we want you to get before you leave is that shares are just like a property. You can rent them and generate an income. And so many people might think of it as a property investor. You might buy a house, put in tenants, and collect rent. And maybe, depends how you finance it, maybe 10, 20, 30 years from now, you've got the price of the house back in terms of when you add up all the rent you've collected from your tenants, that was the original price you pay for the house. The stock market, using the system that we've developed over time, will get you there 10 times faster. So it's not unusual for us to get our money back within 2 to 3 years. I was just looking at Celine's dashboard there, and without going into the specifics of the figures, she's already collected more income than she's invested, and to the tune of 1.25. So for every dollar she's invested, she's actually got already $1.25 back in income. So she's now covered her original investment, and everything from now on is pure positive cash flow in her account. So that was achieved in 32 months. So that's what is possible for you if you want to start small, dip your toe in the water. As Celine said, watch the masterclass first, and then if you like what you see there, then you're welcome to join one of our communities.
Mm-hmm. Something that I remember when I started this journey and I started educating myself, and, oh my God, I read the 600-page book that Tony Robbins is like, Master the Money Game. I've read books on psychology. I mean, I went down a very, very deep rabbit hole of how to invest, the psychology of money, the way that it works, like why it works the way the energy moves. And I've also done an episode on this podcast called Investing in Your Financial Mindset. I believe it's one of my first ones, number 7 or something like that. And I highly, highly recommend, for those of you who are still like feeling you're at your edge when it comes to your wealth mindset, to listen to that, because it will give you a bit more behind the scenes of my personal journey, expanding into a different way of relating to wealth. But one of the things that I remember when we started to do our work together, and we were about a year in, even in the beginning, I would say this phrase that I'm about to share. And then I kept saying it about a year in, and it took me about a year and a half to actually get what we were doing and understand that it was real. I remember the tangible moment where I got it was when I had to withdraw money. I had an emergency and I had to withdraw a chunk of money, and I was able to do it in less than 48 hours. The money was liquid. It was in my account. And I was like, oh my God, this is not a Ponzi scheme. Like, this is the real deal. Like, I just withdrew a bunch of money, and then all I wanted to do was put it back. The words that came through for me was, this is too good to be true. And I remember you and I having multiple conversations about this. I'm like, how is this possible? Like, I don't get it. And I know you've gotten that a lot, that, investing in the stock market and like consciously choosing the ethical companies that have proven to perform well. And actually doing so in a way that's methodological, also soul driven, but methodological. It yields really high results. And so how would you break down this, like, it's too good to be true, like, myth buster?
Yes, like anything, it's only good if you put the work in and know how to pick the great companies and know how to pick them when they're good value and know how to be able to generate that income and actually get the price of the share back in 2 to 3 years. So it is a system. You can either be clever and delegate that to somebody who spent, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 hours on it, which is available to you if you listen to this podcast. You don't have to spend thousands of hours. And, people say to me, how come you're so successful? And I say I'm successful. I'm an overnight success after 20 years of hard work of figuring this out. So it's not easy. You have to figure it out. Once you know it, the best way I can explain to people listening is that if you take yourself back to the time that you couldn't swim and you had to learn to swim, or you couldn't ride a bicycle and you had to learn to ride a bicycle, initially the whole task of riding a bicycle or swimming seemed very difficult at the time. But once you've got it, you've got it. And this is no different. You could ride a bicycle and then not ride a bicycle for 10 years and jump on one again. You can ride it again. You've got inherent within you that skill. And so that's what's available to anybody listening to this podcast, is that you can join a community, start small with a small amount of money, watch a few webinars, like we meet once a month on Zoom for an hour. And then it's a complete foreign language. It makes no sense whatsoever. Celine talked about, but do what Celine did. Keep asking questions, keep digging. And eventually, all you need to do is get the concepts. The mechanics are the mechanics, but the concepts, once you grab the concepts, it's real easy. I mean, I know Celine talked about Coca-Cola and there's questions about, the ethics of selling sugary drinks. But Warren Buffett just shared there last year at his AGM. He said in 1994, we invested $1.3 billion in Coca-Cola. And by 2003, we got all the money back in simple dividends, and that's only a 2% yield. Like Coca-Cola pays out a 2% dividend. So from dividends alone, Warren Buffett was able to get the price of his shares back. And now I looked at the figures there recently. He's got 10 times the investment back. So he invested $1.3 billion to buy about 9% of Coca-Cola. He's now got $13 billion back in just dividends. And dividends is only 2% of what we do. Again, I'm just looking at Celine's dashboard here, and all the wonderful work we do with Celine. 2% of our activity is dividends, 98% is the other forms of income we get. So if Warren Buffett can get his money back 10 times over on Coca-Cola with just dividends alone, what I always say, what we do is Warren Buffett on steroids.
And I can definitely attest to that. What this brings up is a little story of when I was at a Tony Robbins event. And there's that guy, what's his name? Joseph
McClendon, yeah.
It's so funny.
Yeah.
What is it?
McClendon the third, yeah.
Yeah. Joseph McClendon the third. Yeah. He does this exercise at Unleash the Power Within. And like there are 8,000 to 10,000 people in the room, okay? So keep this in mind. He plays a game of Simon Says. And for those of you who are maybe, didn't spend too much time in the US, it's a game where you say, Simon says, touch your nose, and then you touch your nose. Simon says, touch your head, and you touch your head. But if they say touch your mouth and they didn't say Simon says, then you lose. If it's like Simon says, touch your nose, Simon says, touch your head, touch your mouth, and then you touch your mouth, you lose the game and you have to sit down. So he had 8,000 people stand up from their seat, and he starts to play Simon Says. Within, I would say, 3 to 5 minutes, about 200 people are left standing. Like he just wipes them. He wipes, 7,500 people, whatever, just down in minutes. And then those 200 people, it takes about 5 more minutes for them to narrow it down. And then he gets it down to about 30 people. But that takes long. It takes longer to get it from 200 to 30 than it did to 8,000 to 200. Okay. And then he brings the 30 people on stage, and it takes about 10 minutes until finally they have a winner and there's one person that's left standing. Yeah. And so what Joseph said after was something to the extent of, when you all stood up, you thought you were competing against 8,000 people. But actually, you were competing against around 200 people, 30 of them who were serious about this. So 30 out of 8,000 people in this room actually believed that they were going to win this game, and they were giving it their all to do so. It was a lesson that stayed with me for many, many reasons. But the way that I apply it to this specific example, when I think about investing and when I think about the stock market, is that I think a lot of people have been burned because they're just like, oh, let me just intuitively feel this out or take some advice from a friend who doesn't have that experience, or they think, or they have a theory, and then they go and they invest in whatever one of those 8,000 companies. But those 8,000 companies, most of them are not that great. They're not dedicated to their success and they're not succeeding. Out of those 8,000 companies, there's 200 that are solid and there's 30 that are really, really serious. So if you invest your money and your time, you take the time, you take the energy, you hire the expertise, whatever it is you need to do to consciously choose the 30 companies, you are going to make way more money than anyone who would have invested in anything outside of those 30 companies. And that's how I see it when we talk about those 1,700 companies that have been analyzed from a third-party perspective. And you can really see that these 1,700 companies have a track record. They have a track record. They have been tested, trialed and tested that they are solid companies. And from there, then you choose your cream of the crop. Then you choose your 30, your 40, and even bringing it more into the spiritual realms. That's when you can align your dollars with your values. And similar to what I do is I love, a lot of the companies I've chosen to invest in are Trader Joe's and the Sprouts Market, and companies that are have a mission to make technology better, to make food better, to make the collective better. So when I hand select from those pre-selected companies, in the metaphor that I said, those 30 people, those 30 companies, then that's when I choose the ones who I'm personally most aligned with. And then I feel really good because I'm like, whoo, I am so excited to be giving my money to these companies and to be supporting their mission. I'm aligned with them and they're performing really well and they're serious about winning the game and, playing this game. And that's when I feel you have the formula, a winning formula for how you can thrive in the stock market, because you're choosing good companies. You're not doing it randomly. You're doing it intentionally. Plus, you're aligning your own personal values to it. Plus, you have your energy in it, aka your money, right? And so, with that, then I'm not surprised that my account is exploding because I can feel in my bones that what I'm doing is ethical, aligned, and it is me contributing to the collective. It is me giving my dollars to something that is bigger than me, that is of service and to me, to my future family, and to the collective through the companies that this is serving. So that is how I found the answer to my own question that I asked you a year and a half ago, being like, how is this ethical? I actually found that answer through my own embodied experience of navigating the stock market.
Yeah. A great way to summarize the stock market is that everybody knows that you can take a potato, plant it in the ground, and you're going to get 10 potatoes, because that's just what happens. And the reason why people know that, they trust the ground. They know the ground will do that. All they need to do is do a bit of research, figure out the stock market, and say, well, the stock market is just like the ground. For every dollar I put in the stock market, I can get $10 back. And once they can learn to trust the ground, aka the stock market, then there's nothing stopping them.
And that's part of the work, is learning how to trust. That's part of the inner work, is learning how to trust the ground, or more simply put, learning how to trust life, learning how to trust yourself. For me, the way it looked like for me is I needed to learn how to trust life. I needed to learn how to trust myself, but I also needed knowledge. I needed to educate myself and actually see that these preconceptions that I had about the stock market, that it's evil, that it's just a way to feed capitalism, and capitalism is this hungry beast that just continues to take advantage of people. Yes, there is places and spaces where there's companies that are not in integrity, where the capitalism has not been helpful. Yes, and the opposite is also true, because we are living in a world of duality. We are living in the paradox of life. And I do feel like you can choose your adventure where you can, dabble in the stock market in a way that's really unethical, really icky, maybe makes tons of money, maybe lose tons of money, and have that be a really distorted, icky, not an integrity experience. But on the flip side, you can also enter the stock market consciously and as a spiritual being who gives, a crap about the world, like as a spiritual being, as I know so many of you listening are, who does care about contributing to the collective, you get to bring your precious dollars into a space consciously in a way that's actually going to be of contribution. But that's up to you. It's up to the choices that you make. It's up to which companies you choose to invest in. It's up to you whether you actually do your homework, whether you learn to trust instead of being greedy or being like unconscious about it. There are so many different ways to cut the pie. And what I really love about this work that we've been doing together, Owen, is that I feel I'm really finding my footing in how I can cut the pie ethically in a way that makes sense for me, in the way where I can contribute and receive from the wealth distribution that the stock market provides, and also do that in a way where I can go to sleep at night and know that, number one, money's happening while I'm sleeping, and which is a great feeling in and of itself. And number two, where that money is being invested is going to generate, it's going to generate growth. And it looks like, companies that are into health and tech doing their job better, and it looks like Trader Joe's like pumping out their healthy food, and all the other wonderful companies that I'm really proud to have invested in, doing what they do best and serving people in the way that they know how to serve.
Yes, and you're also adding value to the companies and the employees, because behind every employee, they have to go home and feed their family. So there's a ripple effect. You're adding value to society as well.
I love it. Beautiful. Well, this has been quite the download on wealth, the stock market, and how to create money in ways that feel that are contributing, that are really like spreading. So before we let you go, Owen, for anyone who's listened, they've made it this far, they've been listening to this entire like mini masterclass that we've shared. Is there anything that you want to leave people with as they walk away from this episode, thinking about what it is that how they want to show up for their wealth identity, and the decisions they want to make, either in the stock market and or just in their financial future?
Yeah, so what I want to share, Celine, is I know in my heart and soul that everybody that's listening to this podcast can be super successful in the stock market. They just need to trust that there's a process, and everything is learnable. And so just dip your toe in the water, start small, and just by making a small decision now will make a massive difference in your life 10, 20, 30 years from now.
Yeah. And that small decision might not only look like, setting a certain percentage of your income aside to be putting towards an investment that you trust in and that you feel really comfortable with. But it can also look like buying that cup of coffee for a stranger in the line, it can be that small. So like, think about it as the giving and the receiving, even though you're giving up, quote unquote, a certain X amount of dollars. The way I see it is that I'm giving that amount of money that gets taken out of my account automatically every month. I am giving it to my future self. I am giving it to my future family. I am giving it to my peace of mind. Yeah. And that, so that future me can receive from that. And then the small ways, like, the receiving of the parking lot and that dollar in the bathroom stall. I also find ways like, where is it that I can sprinkle in a little magic for someone else and really continue to exercise the muscle of generosity, which can only beget more wealth. Honestly, that's one of the secrets I've learned from the wealthy people of the world, is like, it's just giving. Generosity, giving, like being in the economy of giving really is, it's the key. And so, the secret to, Tony says, the secret to living is giving. So,
Yes.
so I love that. It's such a powerful lesson. And Owen, so for people who are curious to learn more about this, number one, in the show notes, you can go ahead and just have immediate access to the masterclass we've put together. It's called Invested, where we go deeper into the nitty gritty, more into like the how you can, generate long-term profit in the stock market. So make sure you sign up for that. And inside that masterclass, you will also have the option to reach out to Owen directly if you want to get in contact with him and explore, any possibilities of working with him, as I have. And then two is, where else can we find you if you want to learn more about you?
So when I go to Instagram, it's called Why Wealth, WHY Wealth. They can pop a message in there, or LinkedIn, my name, Owen O'Malley, in LinkedIn. That'll be the two places to reach me on the social media platforms. But the logical step, as you said, is watch that masterclass. And at the end of that, we actually give you the link to my calendar where you can actually book a time with me to have a one-to-one.
Beautiful. Perfect. Well, all of you who are listening, thank you so much for your attention. Thank you for coming. And we hope that this has given you a nice, juicy download on wealth, money, investing, and some inspiration on how to walk away from this episode and move forward and really ask yourself, walking away, this is the invitation. What is your next step towards your wealth identity? What is your next step towards really creating that financial security, freedom for yourself that you are desiring? So, as always, if there's anything that struck out, anything that really, that touched you in this episode, feel free to screenshot, let us know, tag us, let us know what it is that you loved. For those of you who love these episodes, whether this is your first one you've come across, have you listened to several, we would so appreciate it if you could pop into the Apple Podcast and leave us a review, as that allows more people to find this material, and it's so deeply appreciated. So that's it for today. Thank you again, Owen, and until next time.
Thank you, beautiful humans, for tuning in to today's episode of It's Not What You Think. If you loved what you received today, make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out on future episodes, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, as it helps us reach even more amazing listeners like you. If we aren't already connected on social media, come receive even more tips and inspiration by following me on Instagram at Celine DaCosta, or visiting my website at CelineDaCosta.com. After listening to this episode, I invite you to take a few moments to reflect. What stood out to you? What were your key takeaways or breakthroughs? And if there was one action step you could take from this, what would it be? Thank you again for joining me on this journey. I'm sending you so much love, and I can't wait to connect in the next episode. Until then, keep sharing your unique gifts and living out your most magical life.